All right, here we are. You are wherever you are right now, doing whatever you're doing. And I'm here talking into a microphone. And those two instances have come together. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. How's everyone? Are you new? Welcome. Everybody else? How's it going? Is everybody okay? Last week, I came to you right in the last minute. This week, it's just the opposite. I'm way early. Normally, it would be at the end of the week, and it's only Wednesday, which also happens to be the day after Super Tuesday. And oh my gosh, I didn't want to bring it up. And normally, I would wish to be in a very different mood than I'm in right now when I go to record an intro. But I've got a whole trip to do this weekend, and the itinerary is really up in the air. I don't know where I'm going to be, and I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to do it. So I've got time right now, and I'm doing it right now. It's the day after Super Tuesday. And once again, I'm just profoundly scratching my head. I don't understand. Were we not all watching the last 6 weeks when Biden was completely imploding, and now we're just supposed to believe he's our guy? It's crazy. It's crazy. Listen, I know everybody doesn't agree with me. Maybe not all of you are Bernie supporters. In fact, I know not all of you are Bernie supporters, but I'm just asking to educate yourself. I mean, Biden is just... He's so deeply flawed. He's the same playbook. We've seen it before. Gore, Kerry, Clinton, just like the moderate, middle of the road, corporate Democrat who's really no different than the Republican. And it is really amazing to see, as Kyle Kulinski said, the Empire Strike Back, you know, the concerted effort. Those endorsements and the closing of the polling stations. I mean, I'm sorry. That was a really concerted effort to stop him. And why? Because he's the only one who's going to challenge the power structures at all. And some people, when they hear me say that, they think that's like a scary, bad thing. Like, we don't want to challenge the power structures. Like, there'll be a collapse. And I'm saying, no, we have to challenge these power structures. We have to try to seize back a little bit of the balance of power to people rather than just money, interests. So, some of you are annoyed, I'm sure, but can't help it. And right now, it is basically even. I was just looking, it's like the delegate count is basically even. So, it's not over, but I don't know. I said it before, and I will say it again. If we don't get Bernie elected, we are fucked. We are. Because there's no way Biden's going to win, really? You really feel confident about that? I don't. Well, you know, it's funny because it seems like whenever today's guest, Nischala Joy Devi, shows up and I get to have a conversation with her, it's often in a moment not unlike this one, where I need heart. I need to feel from my heart. I need my mind to be not given all of the power, and I need to feel from my heart more. And that's one of the things I love most about Nischala. She seems to really operate from there, and she has a new book out on meditation. And it's rooted in the sutras, and if you were here last week, and if you were here some weeks ago when Seth Powell and Chase Bossert were here, been having these ongoing conversations about Patañjali's Yogasūtras. I had 2 different conversations with Seth and Chase, and then last week with Ranju and David. And this week, we're talking with Nischala. And she, as you will hear, has a very different viewpoint and a different way of translating it, a different presentation of what she thinks the sutras are and what they're saying, and specifically about the very enigmatic last three limbs, the whole meditation world that sometimes seems very nebulous and unclear. Well, Nischala is here to see if she can make it clear for us. And I so enjoyed getting a chance to talk to her again. And I think that you are most certainly in for a treat today. Before we get to that, let me mention some upcoming dates for my Gentle is the New Advanced Easing the Pain Tour 2020. I'm not canceling anything yet. I know some people are canceling stuff, but I'm not going to live in fear. These are going to be small events, and I think it's going to be fine. I am carrying on with the tour. I'm going to be in Sarasota, Florida, March 21st and 22nd. I'm going to be in Austin, Texas, April 11th and 12th. And Australia, Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne, May 2nd through 10th. And Madison, Wisconsin, May 30th, 31st. You can learn about those dates and more and the tour in general. And you can register at jbrownyoga.com/tour. That's jbrownyoga.com/tour. Okay, I think that is it. I don't think there is anything else that needs to be said. I'm kind of nervous that if I try to say anything else, I'll regret it. And we have such a fantastic conversation to listen to today. So let's just go ahead and get to it. I will touch base with you on the other side. But for now, let's listen to this conversation that I had with Nischala Joy Devi.
Hey, Jay.
Hello, Nischala.
What a joy to talk to you so soon. This is great.
I know. Well, I'm so glad to have heard from you. And I mean, it's been about, 7-8 months or something since we last spoke, but it's like time flew by.
Oh my goodness, didn't it? Wow.
I know, but I have to say, well, first of all, before I jump in to tell you something, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. As you can see, I've been so busy.
Yeah.
And now that this book is out, I'm going to pull back just a little bit. And I have some more in the works. But I want to take a little bit of breathing space in the meantime.
Well, I can understand that. I'm kind of in the throes of it myself right now and looking for a little bit of that downtime as well.
Yeah, tell me, what's going on?
Oh, well, no, I don't want to tell you about my stuff. No, I have a lot of new projects in the works, and, they seem to all land around at the same time, instead of spreading out.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the excitement of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I know. And I think those of us that are creative want to keep that creative juice going.
And you want to seize on it when it's there.
That's what, because you never know when it's going to go away. And you get really excited about it, and the juices flow and the energy's there. And it's good for people. It's not like it's a selfish thing. So it just keeps going. And then every once in a while I say, stop pulling me. Let me just rest for a day or so.
Sometimes you got to take the hat off, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I was going to say before that there are a number of convergences that are also bringing us together at this time.
Oh.
I don't even know that you would know all of them. But
no.
I mean, last time I spoke to you, we talked about the Namaste effect.
Right.
Which I have to say, ever since we had that conversation, whenever I have those moments where the space between me and someone else seems to disappear.
Right.
I think of you some, Nischala.
Oh, that's so sweet.
you coined the moment, and it's nice to recognize when those moments happen.
Yeah, they're sweet, aren't they?
Yes, and so you really crystallized that for me in our conversation. So thank you for that.
Well, you're quite welcome.
And the other thing that we talked about when you were last here is we talked about your translation of sutras some as well.
Right.
And how that happened, and the audacity of you to do such a thing. And, since then, I have had like a bunch of scholars on to talk about sutras. In fact, I had 2 scholars on, Seth Powell and Chase Bossert, at the same time. And they went really in depth into these like translations of sutras, and they didn't entirely agree on everything. Of course, they were very respectful, very cool guys, but they went really in depth. They spent like 40 minutes, talking about the word Nirodha.
Oh, they love that. I love that.
And it was wonderful. Like, don't get me wrong. It was really fun. And I think all of us who got to listen to it, even those of us who like a lot of it went over our heads some, still enjoyed it because they were really great guys and it was really honest inquiry, But at the same time, you reached out to me recently and you told me you had this new book on meditation. And I would have talked to you about anything. But when you said meditation, of course I would want to speak to you. And you also said something in your email about how you felt like a lot of considerations of meditation are coming from a Buddhist standpoint.
Yes.
And you wanted to offer like a yogic perspective. And I kind of agreed with that. I don't always hear a yogic perspective on meditation because those last three limbs, they're real confusing.
Yes. Yes.
So in any case, I'm a long ways around to get to that. In that conversation with the scholars, they were really focused on translating those texts. And there's a certain amount of assertion of one might be more right. No, they weren't really saying that, but there's sort of an underlying, like, getting the translations right. And
is there such a thing?
I don't know. And I will also say that I have since also recorded a conversation with 2 other gentlemen who translated sutras. And I don't know if it's going to post before or after this one, but they were very clear about when they felt like they were trying to do some of that and when they were really just providing like what they would maybe call an interpretation or like what they learned from their teachers essentially, which aren't necessarily about specific, like linguistic translations of the texts.
The problem is yoga is a system of practices. It is not an intellectual learning experience. And to try to make it into that it has more practices in it than any other tradition in the world. And the reason is you're supposed to practice to be able to get the answers to what you're trying to seek. And this is very confusing because many of the other traditions have this very heady part to it. They analyze, they do things like that. That's really not what yoga's about. So I think, and I'm sure you read my account, I think it was in the Namaste Effect, about that experience I had with the male scholars at that convention, that conference.
Yes, you told us about it last time you were here, and one of them came up to you and thanked you because you were offering something of a different sort.
Well, they didn't exactly thank me, but they...
Well, there's some kind of acknowledgement. I thought one person came up to you and told you that it was good, if I recall, that you'd done that. But I know you got a lot of resistance.
Oh, my God. So, it's just I think this is what my experience is. This, to me, seems like a Western imposition of what we think the yogic practices are. There's so few texts even of yoga compared to texts of other things because it wasn't supposed to be taken literally. It was an experiential tradition, and it still is.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I would also say is that for me, having spoken to these different scholars, and some of it's very interesting, like if Nirodha means trying to still your mind or trying to direct your mind, that actually does make a difference in a way. Or even sometimes they were having this whole debate about whether, the commentary was written by, Patañjali or somebody else, like all these.
I thought that's really clear that he never wrote a commentary.
See, that's what some people believe, and some people trying to make the case that they think it was the same guy. But see, there's an interesting conversation there.
But the question is, does it matter?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. I don't know that it does.
When you're sitting there trying to figure out where the light of your divine self is and how to get there, I don't think we care about how the words are expressed. And that's, I guess, what I'm saying. First of all, using the word mind, this is a new concept. The yogis never used the word mind because there wasn't a word for mind then. So all this that we're adding in is very modern, and a lot of it is it's from the psychological and Buddhist community.
Well, you know,
I'm not saying it's bad.
No.
I'm just saying that we have to understand that this is not an intellectual practice. This is a practice that you actually have to sit for.
Well, you know, I love that. And the convergence that really happened for me is that after talking to all of those scholars, you know, I sometimes do like a talk on history and philosophies of yoga. And after talking to them, I started to think of basically what you just said, is that on some level, what I'm interested in most is the ideas that are useful and helpful.
Yes.
And if the ideas and practices, as you said, are useful and helpful, then it doesn't really matter. And
you know, when you're sitting there, nothing matters. Nothing matters. And that's where what I wanted to get into today is the difference between what people think is a practice of meditation and actually is a state of meditation. There is no practice of meditation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I like that. I've talked about that because I did try to meditate for many years and it was a kind of futile effort.
Yes. Yeah, because you can't make yourself meditate.
Well, and also, you know, some of the things that I was doing, I think in the end were a little bit almost detrimental because I would have very interesting experiences sitting with myself, you know, like even inwardly blissful experiences. But my life was really messed up.
Yeah.
And what I was doing in the seated part wasn't actually helping my life get any better. It was sort of making it worse because everything sucked outside of my life. But at least when I sat, I felt better or something. So there needed to be an integration process to it. And as you said, it became much more of like a result. Like there are times when I have those kind of experiences, but I don't try to make them happen so much.
Right.
So in any case, I'm interested in that you wrote it as meditation is that all-pervasive feeling of peace when we experience dynamic stillness.
Yes.
Those are the words you're using to describe it as a state, right?
Yes, yes.
So can you say something more? What do you mean by dynamic stillness? Because that does kind of go to this Nirodha conversation that people are having about stillness. What do you mean by dynamic stillness?
I think the concept in our society is if you're sitting still, you're doing nothing. And many of us have heard the expression, right? Don't just stand there, do something. Well, so people say, oh, sitting for meditation is a waste of time because you're not doing anything. And what I wanted people to understand, at least it's my experience of it, that there's so much more happening when you're still than can possibly happen when you're moving or thinking. There's a whole internal world that takes over, but it's in a place of stillness. But it's not a static stillness. It's a dynamic stillness that, as you just described, then goes into your everyday life.
Well, you know, sometimes when I've experienced some idea of what you're saying with people who are in my class is even just in Shavasana, sometimes people will have this idea like, I'm not good at Shavasana.
Right.
Which I always thought was kind of funny, right? You laugh because like, how can you not be good at just lying there, not doing anything? But I think it's because they're thinking. And there's this idea that a good Shavasana means you're not thinking. And I'm always like, no. Your mind's going to think. So even though you're lying there still doesn't mean nothing's going on. There's lots going on.
And I think what's happened right now, and you're so right to point this out, is there is a total confusion in people's minds between Savasana or deep relaxation or yoga nidra, whatever you want to call it. Shavasana actually is technically the asana that the body is in. It's not the state that the mind is in.
Yes.
So I think we've confused things so much. And then we move into imagery. Well, is imagery meditation? Is yoga nidra meditation? No. Meditation is meditation. It's Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. It's totally separate. And this is such a difficult concept for the Western mind, because we think as long as we're still, it's all the same. And it's definitely not. And the way Patanjali has written it out is in different steps, one leading directly to the next. And so this has become a confusion, and I hear this all the time. People say, oh, yoga nidra is the same as meditation. It's not the same as meditation. If it was the same as meditation, there wouldn't be another word for it.
Very interesting. Well, could it be like aren't there many different forms that meditative practices might take, you know? I mean,
absolutely.
When you say, are you being very specific about what you think meditation is referring to, though? Clearly.
Okay, so when you're using, it depends if you're using meditation as an adjective, because you just said that meditative practices. There are many meditative practices, but there's not many meditation. Now, there's ways to get to meditation. But once you're in meditation, it's really not a practice anymore. It's a state of being. So what you are, and you're in a state of dynamic stillness. The mind is not involved.
And then you do things that might bring that about for you or set the stage for that.
Exactly.
But that's not the meditation, right? Those are the practices.
Exactly. So this is how I describe it simply. I think it's simple. It's a lot like falling asleep. So for instance, it's 10 o'clock at night. I go into my bedroom, and what do? Well, I do my cleansing. I brush my teeth. I wash my hair, brush my hair, do whatever, take a shower, whatever you do. You put on sleeping clothes or not, depending who you are. And then what do? You get into bed. And you get into bed and you lay there with the hope that at some time you're going to just sleep will overtake you. There's nothing you can do to make yourself sleep. There's preparation you can do, like taking a warm bath, et cetera, et cetera. But the actual meditation, sleeping, you have to wait until it overtakes you. And then you wake up in the morning and you say, oh, I slept last night. Meditation is very similar. You do all these things. You do pranayama, you do asana, you stretch, you bend, you watch your diet, all those things, and maybe even a yoga nidra to relax you. And then what happens? You sit there and you allow the practices and everything you did before that to overtake you and take you into a state of meditation.
I like that.
Doesn't that make sense?
It makes sense to me in a lot of ways, because as I said, I did spend a lot of time in a seated position, doing things, or sometimes it would just be observing my breath, or like doing meditative practices, I guess you would say. But I wasn't really experiencing like what you're talking about in terms of a state,
right?
And later on, I let go of that practice. And the way I always sort of thought about it was there's just one occasion where it's too long a story to tell, but I was living in Brooklyn and trying to grow a lawn in the backyard.
Okay.
And
a lawn grows in Brooklyn.
It really is. It was like unheard of thing. Like I went to the hardware store and I asked for the seed, and the guy looked at me like I was nuts. Like, where are you going to grow a lawn in Brooklyn? But it was like, I wanted to try to grow a lawn for my daughter. And so, I first totally cheated and put like sod in one year, and then it didn't stick. But then I really tried, and I seeded, and I did all these things that I learned that I should try to do. And then the next year came around, and I was like in my room, and I did a practice with myself, just like you were saying, like some breathing and moving, and the weather was kind of nice, and I looked outside, so I went outside, and all the little blades of grass were coming up.
Oh.
And I went into what I think of as a real state of I got down on my hands and knees. You know what I mean? Like put my face close to them. I mean, it was like a very, it overwhelmed me with an awe, And,
it's a miracle.
It lasted for like a good 15, 20 minutes.
Wow.
And I thought, that's what I think meditation is. Like that. So that's in line with what I feel like you're saying, that to think of it that way, to try to do it actually almost undoes the creating of those circumstances.
Well, I'm laughing. First of all, that's a beautiful example that you just gave, because this is what happens. It goes back to actually to our last conversation. That's the namaste effect. That's the meeting that person, or in this case, the grass, in their essence, and their essence merges with your essence. And that's what we talk about. So with meditation, it's the same idea. It's a letting go more than a doing. And this is something that a lot of us have a difficulty with. Again, sleeping. Sleeping has become like this phenomenon now, the amount of sleep problems that people have. Right? So one of the issues with it is you get in bed and you start to say to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm not falling asleep. I have to get to sleep because I have to get up tomorrow. I have an early appointment, and I have to get to sleep. And you start to work yourself up into a state where sleep is almost impossible. And this is the same thing what happens with meditation. They sit there and say they're saying a mantra or observing the breath. And you sit there and you say, oh, nothing is happening. I can't even focus on this. Why am I wasting my time? Why am I doing this? And every time you do that, it takes you further and further away from the state of meditation. And it brings you instead to the tumultuous movement that is constant in the mind. Let me just give I think this is a simple way of thinking of it. As I was writing the book, actually it started off as an online course. And that's because I'm doing all these online courses for yoga teachers in topics where I think that they could use a little more education. And meditation seems to be one of those places. And what I realized that all the techniques that we are given, all the practices that we call the meditation practices, again, using as an adjective instead of a noun, that what happens is we begin to experience this in a particular way. So we have the agitated mind and emotions. Let's have that on. Say that's on the left side, because I can't show you. We're not visual. And then
you're holding your left hand out to the left, right?
I am.
Okay, on the left side, she's holding her left hand out to the left. Go ahead.
And then on the right side, we have this, if you can imagine, this peaceful calmness, however you want to imagine it. It can be an infinite sky. It can be the evening sky with the infinite stars, whatever way, a beach, an ocean, anything you want to imagine that brings about a state of calmness when you think about it. And then in the middle of those two is a bridge. Now, this bridge is what we call our meditative practices, or what I would call them even more correctly are the pratyahara aspects. So everything that we have been given that is, quote, a meditation practice is really a pratyahara practice that helps us draw all of our awareness inward.
It's a concentration practice, right?
Well, I would say, then you're getting into a little bit of confusion because we're translating a Sanskrit word into English that doesn't really have an English equivalent. Mm-hmm. So the first word is dharana. And dharana.
Wait. Don't go to dharana yet. Yet.
But you went to concentration. That's
okay. So that's the next one. So pratyahara is the drawing of the senses inward. Is that what you were saying just now?
It's two things. It's two parts. The first part is drawing inward, which we always hear about. But the second part is affixing those senses someplace inward. So, for instance, if you drew the sense of sight inward, you draw it into the inner sight or the inner light. So the senses are then confident to draw within and to stay there because they found something they really liked. They don't have to go out. Same thing with hearing. You don't hear the external sounds. You hear what we call the anahata sounds, the inner sounds that go through. So this is what pratyahara is. The first thing is you disengage from the outside. The second stage is you adhere somewhere to the inside. So whether you're observing the breath using a mantra, or any of the other myriad of practices, observing the mind and the thoughts and labeling them, they're all techniques of pratyahara. So that bridge is the pratyahara bridge. And what it does, it takes us from this tumultuous mind and emotions through the bridge of these meditative practices, if you like that word, to finally lead us into this vastness of a state that brings us into a place of calmness, of dynamic stillness.
Dynamic stillness. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about this pratyahara bridge.
Okay.
Because another thing you said earlier just now, you said is more about letting go.
Yes.
And this pratyahara bridge, I think the confusion sometimes is that it feels like it's more about control. Like that was what the whole conversation around Nirodha was like. Right. It's always about trying to still your mind or even trying to direct your mind. That there's a certain like a idea that you're controlling your mind with these pratyahara practices to rein it in from all its fluctuations. But that controlling of mind doesn't sound like that's what you're talking about when you're talking about a process of letting go. So how does a pratyahara bridge not be controlling the mind, but helping us let go?
You know, I always turn it back to people when they say yoga, meditation is about controlling the mind, or even the way the second sutra is translated 90% of the time. Mm-hmm. Yoga is control of the thought waves of the mind. And I always ask people, and I'm going to ask you, have you ever tried to control your mind?
Yes, it doesn't work.
I was going to say, how'd you do?
Terrible. Terrible. It's the dumbest thing to try to do ever. It doesn't work at all.
Exactly. So I have a whole section in here to make the mind your friend. Mm-hmm. Don't make it your enemy, because if you make it your enemy, what it's going to do is turn against you. So what happens, you take a benign practice, let's just use mantra, okay? You take a word, you can use any word, or an ancient word, which has a vibrational effect. And you, instead of paying attention to this left side that's all this tumultuous thoughts and feelings, instead you hook onto a word. So let's, just for these purposes, use the word shanti, which means peace. So instead of thinking, oh, she said this to me, oh, he did this to me, why didn't I do this? I didn't make the bath. Instead, you hook onto this word, shanti, and it begins to take you across this bridge, because you're not trying to control all the thoughts. What you do is you're leaving them to do what they do. The mind does what it does. It's like trying to control the ocean and stop the waves. Why try to do that? So what you do instead is leave it there, go across the bridge with the shanti, and in essence, what you're doing, if you go back to the ocean analogy, you're either flying over it where you don't feel the tumultuous waves, or you dive deep within and you don't feel them if you go down 10 or 15 feet. So what happens is, as you're taking this mantram, this Om Shanti, and you are moving further and further away from the left side, the left orb, and you are moving toward that stillness, you get to that point, and when you get on the threshold of the other side of the bridge, ready to move into the dynamic stillness, you let go of the Shanti. You let go of the word. And what happens is you are left with a vibration that then takes you into this vastness. That's meditation.
So you ride the pratyahara technique until you can let it go, the image that came to mind was like when the space shuttle goes up and it lets go of that part that it doesn't need anymore. Exactly.
And it lets go of it because it's too heavy anymore.
Yes, it did its purpose and now it's no longer needed.
Exactly. Well said. Because this is a concept that I've been trying to simplify, because I think it's a difficult concept for us in the West. We don't think like that. Matter of fact, our thinking is king. And we need
and I am sorry to jump in because I'm looking right now at this note I took of your translation for Sutra 1-2. And I'm thinking about this whole conversation I had about this sutra with these guys. And then, it was so much about thinking and thought and mind. And yours says, yoga is the uniting of consciousness in the heart.
Right.
There's nothing about stilling the mind or directing the mind. It's uniting the consciousness in your heart.
Right. That's right. And where did I get that from? Did I make it up?
Well, I don't know. I don't think you did. One thing I wanted to say, and then I want to hear what you were going to say, is you wrote that you look to the vibration of each word. And I learned that Sanskrit was much more about communicating through sound vibrations than sentences.
Absolutely.
And so that's why sometimes when I talk to scholars, they don't like when I suggest that it could be more open than they want it to be on paper, But from a vibratory sound quality, it certainly can.
A vibratory sound quality is the most important thing, and it will get you through that bridge. That's the only thing that will get you through the bridge. Thinking is not allowed on that bridge. You can't, as the minute you start thinking, say you're saying Om Shanti, oh, did I put the laundry in the dryer? You are now back on the left orb. Immediately, you're back on the left orb again. So this is something that, again, it's you have to understand that meditation was not for the masses. Even no matter what tradition you are in, even if we look at Judaism, Catholicism, any of those, you see that the ones that meditate are in what they call the mystical aspect of the tradition. It was not meant for the ordinary person because the ordinary person didn't have the inclination and sometimes the time, because it's really a luxury to be able to sit there like that. Or is it? That's the question.
It's certainly a privilege if you have the time and space to just be able to sit.
It's a privilege, but it's also something that you choose. It was interesting. I just had a class this morning with a group of women, and none of them really know what I do. I kind of keep it a little bit
on the down low.
Yeah. And they were talking, and they said something about doing a spiritual practice or meditating or something. And I said, it's not a choice. You get up in the morning and you just do it. And they said, oh, no, I have other things I want to do in the morning. I want to have my cup of coffee. I want to go for a swim. I want to go for a run. And I looked at them and I said, that's your choice. You can't blame it on time, though. You can't say that it's not enough time. It's your priority and what you want to do with your time. My priority is I get up in the morning and I meditate. That's ironclad. Nothing gets in the way of that. Well, maybe occasionally a 4 a.m. flight, but other than that. So I really feel that we have been led in a way of understanding something that is not really understandable, and we've made it almost practical. And it's not. It's mystical. It's mystical and it's subtle, and it cannot be explained. And that's why I think there's a little story in there about someone sitting with a Zen master, and they said, well, how long do I have to do this? Until you and the practice become one, till you are no longer repeating the mantra. The mantra has repeated itself and has turned into a vibration only. And this is what I think we don't understand, most of us.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, okay. So before I interrupted you, you were about to tell us where you got your definition. Yoga is the uniting of consciousness in the heart. How do you arrive at that?
Okay.
Choice.
That's my wording. But what happened is when I was writing the sutra book, first of all, I had been a student of the sutras for many years. When I started out, I was not interested in asana because I was in medicine and I knew the limitations of the human body, and I was kind of done with it. But I had to do it because it's part of the practice, and I got tremendous benefit from it. However, as soon as I was able, I moved into the other aspects of the teachings that sang to me more verbally. So what happened when I was doing the translation of the sutras, I had all these different translations at my fingertips, literally books open, and they all said the same thing. And I would look at the word chitta, and I'd say, okay, what does this really mean? It doesn't mean mind, and there's no such word, even though they're using it, as mind stuff. There's no such word as mind stuff. A lot of the words they're using, they make up. It has no reference to the English language at all. So what I did then, I said, okay, if this is true, that Patañjali got it from the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, let me go back to the Upanishads, which has been much less translated than any other book at this point. Probably the Vedas and the Upanishads, because they're a lot more esoteric. The Gita and the Sutras have been translated much more. Mm-hmm. And there I saw it clearly stated that consciousness resides in the heart. It's so clear. It's a small, lighter flame in the center of the heart that is called our consciousness. And I thought to myself, that rang true in my heart. My heart said, yes, that's where consciousness is. It's not in the mind. The mind is just a collection of thoughts that are moving around. So that's where I went back to. And I think that this is, I would really recommend to people, this is what I do with science also, by the way. People come up to me and they say, oh, I just read a study that says if you eat 3 chocolate bars a day, your heart is much healthier. And I always say to them, you read that in the lay media. Go back to the scientific journal and see what it really says. And that's the same thing I did with the Upanishads.
Mm. Well, I mean, I've heard references to like the flame in the heart and consciousness residing in the heart. Yeah. But what happens? I've not heard it applied to that particular sutra, because there's the vritti nirodha thing. There's the stilling or the directing of the vrittis. And
what is a vritti?
Like a mind, a thought, or a.
See, this is the problem.
They would call them fluctuations. I don't know. I don't know how to translate Sanskrit. I have no idea. I mean, the idea is, to me, it's always been that there's certain modes of thinking that are leading me away from the direction that you're talking about. Like when you were talking about thinking, and when you were thinking about your laundry while you're trying to sit. Like that's what I think of as sort of the vritti, as sort of that which is in the way of it, in a way. Okay,
let me tell you what the definition literally of a vritti is, because it's also Hindi. Mm-hmm. It means a whirlpool.
Whirlpool. I sometimes call them anxiety spirals. That makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, so now do you understand, though? When you talk about vritti, it's this spinning. It's a whirlpool that can then take you out. It spins you out. But what is, it's not the thought wave itself. It's the action of the thought wave. It's a big difference.
Yeah.
It's a big difference. It's a big difference.
It's the spinning out.
Right. And so also what people don't understand about chitta, which really kind of, I think is a key to the whole yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Nirodha, I don't know why they put so much emphasis on that and so little on the chitta. Because what chitta is fascinating. I think it's fascinating. Chitta, if you look at the word chitta and you take C-H-I-T and separate it from the T-A, right? Mm-hmm. So what you have in Sanskrit, it's a grammatical thing. It's also C-H-I-D is the same. And this means consciousness. Chid is consciousness, right? Mm. I mean, yeah, it is. So what happens is chid is universal consciousness. When you put the ta at the end of it, it turns it into individual consciousness. Mm-hmm. So this is the consciousness that is embodied in each of us, that is part of this chid, which is the universal consciousness. Nothing in it says anything about the mind. It's all about consciousness. But what we have done in the last 150 years, when psychology has moved into our life, is we have taken the concept of mind and used it. Now, it's very interesting. I teach internationally, and I've been teaching in Germany probably, I don't even want to go into how many years it's been. When I first started teaching there, they had no word for mind. So what I had to do, it was very fascinating because I was frustrated. I didn't know how to talk about this. So what I did is I gave a long explanation of what the mind is, and I said, let's use the English word now. So this is a concept that is not universal. It is something that we have adapted, and not only adapted, I have to say this, we have begun a worship of it. We worship the mind. We don't worship the heart. We don't worship kindness. We worship intelligence. And I think if you don't believe me, turn on the news.
Oh gosh, that's not. If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.